Hello everyone, hello Emma. I'm Alex. Welcome to The Zero Margin, the podcast where we explore the moments in history when everything hung by a thread, and somehow humanity found a way through.
And I'm Emma. I have to say, today's episode is one of my favorites. We're taking you back to one of the most dramatic chapters of the 20th century, the race to the moon.
And Emma, you're absolutely right. But here's the thing. This isn't the story most people know. This isn't just about heroic astronauts planting flags and making inspirational speeches.
Nope. This is about failure, about mistakes, about how the greatest achievement in human exploration was actually built on a foundation of things going spectacularly wrong.
And learning from them. That's the key part.
Exactly. So grab your coffee, settle in, because we're going back to October 4th, 1957, a night that changed everything.
Picture this. It's a quiet evening across the United States. Millions of people are doing the small, normal things that make up a life. Dinner plates clinking, TV sets glowing in darkened living rooms, kids half asleep on couches.
Parents thinking about bills and work tomorrow. The world still felt arranged the way it always had. Two vast oceans protecting the American mainland, distance meaning safety.
The sky was something you looked at, not something that looked back at you.
And then something passed overhead.
Not a plane, not a comet, not a star.
A polished aluminum sphere, small enough to underestimate, with thin antennae trailing behind it, broadcasting a sound that didn't belong in the night sky.
Sputnik.
Today, it's a museum artifact. You'd probably walk past it in a glass case without a second thought.
But back then, it felt like a door opening, a door that maybe should have stayed closed.
Because the terrifying part wasn't the ball itself, Alex. It was what it represented.
The rocket behind it.
Think about it. If the Soviet Union could throw that object into orbit, it meant they had boosters powerful enough to throw something else, something much, much worse.
And suddenly, Americans did the mental math in real time. If a rocket can reach orbit, a rocket can reach a city, New York, Washington, Chicago, in minutes, not hours.
For generations, the United States had been protected by geography. Two oceans, vast distances, time to react.
But Sputnik attacked the very idea of time, of warning, of safety.
Overnight, the sky stopped being scenery. It became a battlefield.
And it wasn't just ordinary citizens who felt this. It was generals, engineers, lawmakers, allies. Everyone who had built their assumptions on the map suddenly realized the map had changed.
The fear spread in a uniquely Cold War way, quiet, disciplined, contagious. The stock market rattled. Military planners rewrote their scenarios.
Schools ran air raid drills. Children practiced ducking under desks.
Not because desks could stop anything, obviously, but because ritual is what people do when they can't control the threat.
And the question everywhere was the same. How did they beat us? How did we let this happen?
The answer was humiliating. America wasn't losing because it was unintelligent or lacked resources.
It was losing because it was late. It had talent, it had money, it had industry, but it didn't have urgency. At least not the kind that reshapes an entire country.
On test pads and launch sites across America, rockets were failing, and not quietly either.
These were very public failures. Engines cut out, guidance systems misbehaved, vehicles exploded. The press didn't need imagination. The failures were real, and they were loud.
And then came the moment when embarrassment became spectacle.
A brand new rocket on the pad, cameras aligned, officials stiff in suits, a national attempt to prove to the world and to itself that America could answer Sputnik.
The countdown hit 0. The rocket rose, barely.
It climbed a few feet as if hesitating, then it shuddered, sagged, and collapsed into a burst of flame that swallowed the launch pad.
Live, on television.
Not a setback, a statement. If Sputnik was the beep overhead, This was the fire on the ground, proof that the United States did not have the clean, unstoppable command of rockets that everyone assumed it did.
The world learned something in one image. American confidence was not the same thing as American capability.
That's what Sputnik really changed. It didn't just put an object in orbit, it put doubt into America's nervous system. And once doubt gets in, it demands an answer.
Washington reacted the way Washington reacts when reality threatens reputation. It reorganized, it funded, it accelerated.
NASA was formed in 1958. Research was consolidated. Education priorities shifted. Money poured into science and engineering like never before.
New agencies and programs appeared to ensure the United States wouldn't be surprised again, not by a beep, not by a rocket, not by anything.
But none of that solved the core problem. It's one thing to say, we will dominate space. It's another thing to do it on a deadline while your rockets still behave like they're learning to stand.
Not exactly inspiring confidence, right?
Not at all. Then, in 1961, a young president stepped into the pressure like someone who understood the public story was collapsing.
John F. Kennedy needed a win, yes, but more than that, he needed a narrative that didn't sound like retreat.
He couldn't sell, "We're catching up." Catching up is what losers say politely.
He needed a goal so far away that nobody had already planted a flag in it, a goal so massive that it would force a new race on entirely new ground.
So he chose the moon.
On May 25, 1961, Kennedy stood before Congress and delivered a sentence that would become a national mission.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
It sounds clean when you read it today, like destiny, inevitable.
But the raw truth is sharper. When Kennedy made that promise, NASA did not actually know how to do it, not fully.
They didn't have a proven method for docking two spacecraft in orbit as a routine operation, and that was a basic requirement for the mission architecture they would ultimately use.
They didn't have the full pipeline of reliable life support systems for prolonged deep space flight.
They didn't have the final rocket, not the one that could actually do it, not one tested enough to trust with human lives.
They didn't even have a complete understanding of what the moon's surface would do to a lander. Too dusty, too soft, just unknown enough to be dangerous.
Kennedy didn't announce a plan, he announced a deadline.
And inside NASA, where the applause didn't matter as much as the physics, engineers heard that speech and felt a private kind of panic.
My God, we have 9 years to invent the impossible.
The United States mobilized like it was at war, only the battlefield was math, metal, heat, and time.
Budgets expanded exponentially, contractors multiplied, factories retooled, entire industries were pulled forward by sheer force of will.
People worked brutal hours, slept on couches, lived on coffee, and measured their lives in test windows and launch schedules.
At its peak, the Apollo program employed over 400,000 people and involved more than 20,000 companies and universities.
That's staggering when you think about it.
It really is. But before you can run to the moon, you have to learn to crawl in space.
First came Mercury, a single astronaut, a small capsule, proof that Americans could survive and operate beyond the atmosphere.
Alan Shepard became the first American in space on May 5, 1961, just weeks before Kennedy's speech.
Then came Gemini, longer missions, 2 astronauts, learning the core skills, spacewalks, rendezvous, docking, precision.
Gemini was the awkward middle child of the space race story, but it taught NASA how to actually drive in space instead of simply being thrown into it.
Each mission was a step, and each step carried a hidden question. Will the hardware behave? Will the humans survive?
Will the next error be the one that ends the whole program?
Because the rush was everywhere, and rush is the enemy of perfection.
The deeper NASA went, the more the mission stopped looking like a single leap and started looking like a million fragile details stacked into one towering structure.
A program this big doesn't fail because of one dramatic villain. It fails because of tiny things that weren't respected enough.
Wires, materials, procedures, culture.
And sooner or later, culture becomes hardware.
January 27th, 1967, Cape Kennedy, Florida.
Apollo was supposed to be the next era. Bigger spacecraft, bigger rocket, bigger promise.
Apollo 1, intended as the first crewed flight test of the new command module, had a crew built for pressure: Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee.
Grissom was a veteran, one of the original Mercury 7 astronauts. He'd already flown in space twice.
Ed White had performed America's first spacewalk during Gemini 4.
And Roger Chaffee was the rookie, but highly trained and eager to prove himself.
That day, January 27th, it wasn't a launch. It was a ground test, a simulation, a rehearsal.
The kind of thing that shouldn't make history.
But history loves moments that shouldn't matter.
The capsule was sealed. The system was running. The test was what they called a plugs-out test, simulating the spacecraft on internal power.
Inside the cabin, pure oxygen, pressurized to slightly above atmospheric pressure.
And this one detail turns into a trap.
In normal air, oxygen is only about 21% of what you breathe. The rest is mostly inert nitrogen, acting like a buffer.
In pure oxygen, at higher than normal pressure, fire behaves completely differently. It doesn't crawl, it hunts.
Materials that seem harmless become fuel. Velcro, wiring insulation, nylon netting, anything that can burn burns faster and hotter.
At 6:31 p.m., the calm snapped. A crackle, a spark, then a flame.
Then a sudden surge as the cabin became a furnace.
Grissom's voice hit the radio, sharp and immediate. Fire! We've got a fire in the cockpit.
For a moment, the entire Apollo program existed inside that sentence.
On the ground, technicians moved. Mission Control reacted. People shouted, trying to help.
And then the design decision that would haunt the program revealed its brutality. The hatch opened inward.
In a pressurized cabin, an inward opening hatch becomes a locked door. The pressure inside pushes it closed.
Even under normal conditions, it took 90 seconds to open that hatch. Under conditions like this, time was the one thing nobody had.
Inside, heat and smoke climbed rapidly. Visibility collapsed. Breaths turned toxic.
The fire wasn't a flame so much as an environment. The astronauts fought desperately to escape.
But the physics was stronger than the training, stronger than courage, stronger than everything.
By the time technicians finally forced the hatch open, about 5 minutes after the fire started, the outcome was already written.
3 astronauts were dead before ever leaving Earth. Not lost in deep space, not lost on the moon.
Lost on a launch pad.
America didn't just grieve, it froze.
Because Apollo 1 wasn't a failure you could celebrate learning from. It was a failure you had to carry.
In the investigations that followed, and they were thorough and brutal, the truth was deeply uncomfortable.
Yes, there were technical issues. Wiring that wasn't properly protected, materials that were far too flammable, design flaws in the hatch.
But the deeper failure wasn't in the capsule, it was in the organization.
NASA had been moving fast enough that schedule had started to outrank proof. Experience had started to outrank verification.
Warnings existed, many warnings, but urgency had a way of turning caution into background noise.
Engineers had raised concerns about the pure oxygen environment, about flammable materials, about that hatch.
But the pressure to keep moving, to meet Kennedy's deadline, meant some of those warnings didn't get the attention they deserved.
After Apollo 1, NASA's identity changed fundamentally.
It rebuilt the spacecraft, yes. The hatch was completely redesigned to open outward in seconds. They removed or replaced flammable materials throughout the cabin.
Wiring was rerouted and protected. The pure oxygen atmosphere was changed to a mix at launch, transitioning to pure oxygen only in space, where the pressure was lower.
But more importantly, NASA rebuilt its culture. It became strict in a way that looks obsessive until you realize what the alternative costs.
Checklists became law. Reviews became mandatory and exhaustive. Procedures hardened. Testing became ruthless.
No more, it should work. No more, we've always done it this way. Only, it is proven to work, and we can prove it.
And that is the brutal paradox of Apollo. Apollo 1 is the tragedy that helped prevent Apollo 11 from becoming a tragedy too.
Because from that point on, NASA stopped behaving like it was building a miracle.
And started behaving like it was building a survival machine.
But survival in space isn't only about metal and fire-resistant materials. It's about the invisible part, the mind of the vehicle.
Cut to Cambridge, Massachusetts, MIT, labs with fluorescent lights and coffee cups, quiet rooms where people make decisions that will matter more than any speech.
At the center of Apollo's navigation and control was a small metal box, the Apollo Guidance Computer, the AGC.
By modern standards, it was incredibly limited. It had about 72 kilobytes of memory. Your phone has millions times more computing power.
My watch probably has more computing power.
Right? And yet, NASA was going to trust it with the most delicate maneuver in human history, landing on another world.
So the question became, how do you prevent a small computer from failing when failure means death?
The answer wasn't bigger hardware. The technology wasn't there yet.
The answer was smarter software. And the software culture, the rigor, the priority systems, the failure tolerance, had a leader with a new kind of authority.
Margaret Hamilton. Hamilton was in her early 30s, leading the software engineering team at MIT's instrumentation laboratory.
And she understood something that would become obvious to every engineer later, but was revolutionary then.
Systems don't just fail because they're weak. Systems fail because they're overwhelmed. Too many tasks, too many inputs, too many competing demands, and suddenly the machine does the most human thing possible. It panics.
In space, a computer panic is a fatal luxury.
So, Hamilton's team built code around a radical principle. The computer will not try to do everything. It will protect what matters. It will prioritize.
If the system becomes overloaded, it will automatically discard low-priority tasks and preserve the mission-critical ones.
It's like an intelligent task manager and a safety firewall and a survival instinct, all programmed into a metal box.
This approach wasn't built on bravado or overconfidence. It was built on humility.
We will assume mistakes happen. We will assume overload happens. We will assume real conditions are messier than our simulations. And we will build a system that survives the mess. While much of the country focused on the dramatic stuff, towering rockets and flame-filled launches, some of the most important work happened quietly, in code.
Designed to make the mission resilient to human error, because human error, they knew, was inevitable.
Meanwhile, NASA kept stepping forward. The Apollo missions built confidence incrementally.
Apollo 7 tested the command module in Earth orbit. Apollo 8 went around the moon, the first humans to see the far side.
Apollo 9 tested the lunar module in Earth orbit.
Apollo 10 was a full dress rehearsal, going to the moon, descending to within miles of the surface, then returning.
Each successful flight didn't erase Apollo 1, but it built a path on top of it. Systems tested, procedures validated, the giant Saturn V rocket proven.
Then came 1969. The world had watched the rising. It now waited for the landing.
July 20th, 1969.
Inside the lunar module Eagle, the atmosphere was tense in a way that doesn't require yelling.
Tight cabin, headsets, controlled breathing, instruments glowing like a small city at night.
Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were descending toward the Sea of Tranquility.
This was not a moment for romance or poetry. It was a moment for margins.
The descent engine was not something you could casually restart. Their fuel was limited, their environment was hostile, their home was 240,000 miles away.
And then, at around 10,000 feet above the lunar surface, the spacecraft spoke.
Not in words, in alarms.
A sharp tone, a flashing code on the display.
Program alarm.
Then another.
In mission control in Houston, the air tightened instantly because the computer was not supposed to do this, not now.
Alarm 1202. It meant executive overflow. The computer was overloaded. Too many tasks, too much data coming in. The system was reaching its limit.
And the cause was almost insultingly ordinary. A radar switch had been left in the wrong position, feeding extra data to the computer.
A small human decision that didn't feel dramatic at the time, but could have been lethal.
Human decisions always look small until they don't.
For a breath of time, the entire mission hung on a quiet question. Is the computer about to crash? And if it does, what happens at 10,000 feet above an airless world?
This is where all that invisible work matters, where Margaret Hamilton's priority system gets its moment.
The computer did what it was built to do. It didn't freeze, it didn't collapse into chaos.
It started automatically discarding low-priority tasks to preserve the critical ones: navigation, guidance, engine control.
In Houston, guidance controllers, particularly Steve Bales, a 26-year-old flight controller, evaluated the situation with seconds burning away.
They had to decide, abort or proceed. A single call would determine whether the United States would reach the moon this decade or not at all.
Bales had done his homework. He and his team had run simulations of exactly this kind of overload scenario.
The verdict came, we're go on that alarm. Proceed.
The alarms didn't politely disappear. They returned, 12:02 again, then 12:01, a similar overflow alarm.
Again and again, the computer was telling them it was at the edge of its capacity.
But each time, Houston confirmed, "We're go. Keep going."
The descent continued.
Then Armstrong looked out the window.
The computer's path, the safe landing ellipse that had been pre-programmed, was taking them into a field of boulders and a crater the size of a football field.
If they landed there, they might tip over. A damaged legging leg, a tilted vehicle, an engine ingesting dust on liftoff, anything could be enough. And enough ends men.
Armstrong made the choice that separates simulator confidence from real-world leadership.
He took manual control. Now he wasn't just landing according to a computer's plan, he was flying.
He pitched the lunar module forward, gliding over the surface like a helicopter hunting for a flat patch of moon.
Every second of searching burned fuel they could not replace. There were no gas stations on the moon.
Not yet, anyway.
In Houston, the calls became a countdown. Capsule communicator Charlie Duke speaking for mission control. 90 seconds.
Then 60 seconds.
This wasn't commentary, it was warning. NASA had thresholds, rules about when a landing should be aborted, when the fuel state became too dangerous to continue.
Armstrong kept going, methodically searching.
30 seconds.
Now the margin was razor thin. There was no comfort left, only commitment. They were past the point of no return.
A fuel light came on, the low-level sensor indicating the situation had crossed from tense to critical.
This was no longer about elegance or hitting your mark perfectly. It was about surviving the math.
Then a probe on one of the landing gear legs, designed to extend and touch first, made contact with the lunar surface.
A tiny light appeared on the instrument panel.
Contact light. He said it like a whisper, as if volume could break the spell.
Armstrong shut down the descent engine immediately.
The lunar module dropped the frail few feet and settled onto the moon with a gentle thud.
And Armstrong delivered a sentence with a calm, exhausted. It sounded almost unreal.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
In Houston, there was a moment of stunned silence, then pandemonium. Cheering, crying, people hugging.
Charlie Duke, trying to keep his composure. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You've got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
They were holding their breath the entire time.
They landed with approximately 25 seconds of fuel remaining in the descent stage. That's the often quoted estimate.
25 seconds between success and having to abort, leaving the moon unconquered.
And that's the true story of Apollo, the real story that sometimes gets lost in the mythology.
The moon landing wasn't built only by success. It was built by failure, studied, respected, and engineered around.
Apollo 1 taught NASA what speed and schedule pressure could destroy. 3 men died, and NASA fundamentally changed how it operated.
Margaret Hamilton's software taught NASA what overload could do and how to build systems that could survive their own limitations.
And Neil Armstrong's hands, in that final minute, did what no checklist can do at the edge of reality: make a choice, adapt, survive.
Hours later, Armstrong climbed down the ladder and stepped onto the surface.
The promise Kennedy made in 1961, when the technology didn't exist, when the path wasn't proven, when it still felt like a desperate gamble, became real.
Not because America was destined to win, not because of some manifest destiny,
but because America learned how to survive its own mistakes, how to build systems that could absorb failure and keep going.
And that's what zero margin really means. It doesn't mean perfection.
It means you design as if mistakes are guaranteed, because they are, and you build a system that can live through them anyway.
You respect the complexity. You respect the danger. You test ruthlessly. You learn from every failure.
Because in space, confidence is cheap.
Proof is everything.
You know, Alex, what gets me about this story is how relevant it still is today.
Absolutely. We're building complex systems all the time. Software, infrastructure, organizations, and the lessons from Apollo still apply.
Don't let schedule override safety. Build in redundancy. Assume things will go wrong and plan for it.
Learn from failures before they become catastrophes.
Exactly. Next time on the Zero Margin, we're leaving the silent surface of the moon and returning to Earth.
Where the countdown wasn't measured in fuel and altitude, but in how close we came to global annihilation.
The Cuban Missile Crisis, the week the world held its breath and two superpowers stood at the edge of nuclear war.
It's a story about miscalculation, misunderstanding, and the razor-thin margins that prevented catastrophe.
Thanks for listening to the Zero Margin. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who loves history, science, or stories about how we learn from our worst moments.
You can find us on all major podcast platforms, and if you have suggestions for future episodes, we'd love to hear them.
Stay curious, everyone.
And remember, sometimes the most important victories come from understanding our failures.
Well, Alex, today we brought to light this incredible true story of how failure actually saved one of humanity's greatest achievements.
It really is remarkable, Alex. From the tragedy of Apollo 1 to Margaret Hamilton's brilliant software to those final heart-stopping seconds of fuel, every setback became a stepping stone.
Exactly. And I think that's a lesson we can all take with us, whether we're building rockets or just navigating our own challenges.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining us today on the Zero Margin.
Until next time, take care, everyone.
See you in the next episode.
Bye for now.
Bye.